Alright, now we're going to start. This is a class about getting out of debt, but I wanted to start by talking about the principles behind losing weight. Now, you may have not had this challenge, but most of the people on this earth, at some point or another, have had to lose weight. 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 50 pounds, 80 pounds, whatever. And so let's brainstorm a little bit. This is audience participation. What do you do when you want to lose weight?
Stop eating.
Okay. Stop eating.
I'm with you.
Okay. Irina, did you say something?
Okay, come up with a plan. Well, I guess evaluation what caused you to gain weight to begin.
Oh, that's good. Analysis of the problem. That's very good. What else? I like the plan. Stop eating. That's good.
Exercise.
Exercise. I would say losing weight is hard, and it takes time, and it takes energy,
And you need to have a sport.
and there needs to be accountability. Very good. And it doesn't happen by itself. Right? Would you say these are good? Okay, now, if we change this, say debt, then we could have the same, hey, come on in.
Hi, how long you been on?
Oh, like 2 minutes, you're
Okay.
good, come on in. We first talked about some of the general principles behind losing weight.
Oh, there's somebody
I'm gonna sit there in 1 minute to do my computer part.
Let's do that.
You're
How to lose
good.
weight, stop eating.
How to lose weight, right, stop eating, right, you got it.
That was mine.
That was Kenneth.
Stop eating.
Okay, so for losing debt, I would say it would be stop spending, right?
Uh-huh. No more spending.
Then have a plan. I think that's the same. I think a plan is important. Irina came up with this one, analyze what the problem is. I think that applies exactly. Find your weakness, right? Is your weakness eating out? Is your weakness a fancy car? Is your weakness your kids are doing too many things and you can't afford all the activities? What's your weakness in your finances? You know, you can't say no to your spouse, you can't say no to your kids, you're buying processed foods instead of the cheaper foods and then making them. Like what's your weakness in your finances that you can really address? I would say exercise is like budgeting. And I would say all of these are the same, right? Getting out of debt is hard. It takes time. It takes energy. And you've got to be accountable to someone. Oh, hey John.
Hey.
And it won't happen by itself. Right? So, I really do believe that there's a direct correlation here, that things that we choose to do in life, that are hard, that take energy, that take effort, are ultimately very rewarding, right? When we lose weight, oh man, you feel good about yourself. You like getting dressed in the morning. You like going out and seeing people. When you're out of debt, you feel good about yourself. You get up, you don't have that pressure on your shoulders of, oh man, how am I going to make it another day? What if my car runs out of gas? What if my kid calls and they don't have lunch money? You know, you don't want those ongoing pressures and stresses. So a lot of the same principles apply between losing weight. This is our losing weight half for those who just came in. And this is our losing debt half. So having a plan is very important. And that's what we're going to talk about today is how do you develop that plan? What's the best way? What's step 1, 2, and 3? Because we all know, well, if I stop spending, I'd be able to get out of debt, right? But that's not practical. You still have to pay the bills. You got to pay your utilities. You got to drive your car to work. You can't just completely eliminate all your expenses tomorrow and have all your disposable income and say, oh, good, I'm done, right? So what's a realistic way to set up a plan so that we can get out of debt? So, before you set up that plan, before you can get out of debt, the first step is figuring out how much do I spend. There was an eraser here. Kind of grab that eraser. Thank you. This is my son, Kenneth.
Yes.
I'm Joy, by the way. I think I recognize you, but I don't know your name.
We just went down.
Oh, well, maybe I don't recognize you. You have a nice brother or somebody I've run into at some point in my life. Everybody thinks I look like somebody they know. I have a very generic face, so I get that a lot. All right. All right, so the first step is going to be know what you spend. So you don't have to raise your hand because I don't want to have anybody feel embarrassed. I'm impressed you guys came because it's stressful to sometimes put yourself out there and say, I want to learn how to get out of debt because that means you have debt, right? But we all have debt, so no judging here. But the first step is to know what you're spending. How many of you, don't raise your hand, can tell me how much you spend in groceries in July? Oh, he can. Yeah. So, but that's important. Like, how much did I spend in groceries? How much did I spend in gas? How much did I pay for my car? How much did I... So the first step is tracking. So know what you spent. And that means track your expenses, right? And I would recommend, and I know like after today you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to go do this. But really the first step and the most effective way is to go track what you spend for a month. Just keep track of your receipts. You can do it on a computer, you can do it on your bank software, you can do it on Quicken or QuickBooks or on a pencil and paper. But if you track, I spent this much in food and this much in gas and this much for school lunches and this much for, clothes and this much for gardening supplies and this much in utilities, then you can create a budget. But it's hard to just create a budget without even knowing what's realistic, right? So if I sit down and I say, well, my income is $5,000 a month. And my mortgage is $2,000 a month. So I have $3,000 a month. How much of that is food? Well, if I haven't tracked or anything, I have no idea. It could be $200, it could be $1,200. How am I even going to know what to put down for my budget if I don't know what's realistic for my family? And that's not to say that if I tracked for the next month, then I could go up or down from that, right? Because some months you're going to spend more, like maybe you buy 20 pounds of beef or 100 pounds of beef, and then that's going to last you a few months, and it's going to go up and down, right? But you want to have a general idea. How much am I spending in groceries? How much am I spending for diapers? How much am I spending for, going out to lunch? Or whatever it is, right? So, you tracked your expenses for a month. So now your next step is to create a budget. Okay? How many of you have ever created a budget? Yes? Yes, at some point we've all sucked that up and sat down and been like, oh. There's not as much money as I'd like, and there's too many expenses. So, use whatever method you want, right? But try to track everything. If your car insurance is every 6 months, then put it in your budget. Either do an annual budget and put that in there every 6 months, or do a monthly budget and put a sixth of it in each month, right? Put in birthday gifts. Put in... cell phone, home improvement, car washes, Netflix. What about your medical copays, haircuts, beauty supplies, right? So we're all just going to make our best steps here. I've got on, this thing shut off. Let's see if we can get it back live with this. It was on before. Oh, here we go, it's warming up. So on the link for this class, on the stake website, I've put a half a dozen documents. And so everything I show you is on that link. So you can go and grab it if you want. There are two different budget, it'll be brighter in a minute I think. I think it's just warming up. I just, a couple of years ago, I'm a CPA for a living. So I do bookkeeping and taxes and stuff like that, small businesses and individuals. So I've done stuff like this before, and a few years ago I was like, you know what, I'd like to have a decent budget that I can help people with. So this is one that works because it's got all the months, right? And it's pretty detailed. It's got a lot of things that, garden supplies, home security, home repairs, dry cleaning, childcare, groceries, and you got to decide, are you going to break out diapers as their own line item, or are you just going to include them in groceries? Are you going to include like paper towels and stuff like that separate, or are you going to include them in groceries? For me, I just lump that all into groceries. Anything I can buy at Walmart, except clothes, I pretty much lump into groceries, right? Because I figure I don't want to spend that much time breaking out every receipt, you know? But if I can take a receipt from Walmart and say, okay, there's groceries, then that's good. And if I bought an item of clothes or shoes for my kids or something, it's easy to pull that out, but I don't want to be pulling everything out. Dog food, you know, it's totally up to you. You have to decide, you and presumably your spouse or whoever you're living with, you have to decide, like, how do we want to see it? What is the most useful for us? I often have small business owners say, well, what should I be looking at? And I say, well, what do you want to look at? What is useful to you? What do you want to see? Do you want to see things by job? Do you want to see things by type? Do you want to see things by month? How do you want to see it? As a business owner, what's important to you? So as your household owner, what's important to you? How do you want to see it? There's another one that I actually like better, but it's monthly. See, is that the one I'm on? Yeah, this is the one I like. So this is monthly. It takes a little bit more time because theoretically you would copy and paste this onto 12 different tabs, right, and have one for each month. But what I like about this is it's got that actual column right there. So it's easy to go through at the end of the month and say, okay, I thought I was going to spend this much on my water this month, but, you know, we took a few more showers and I spent a little more, right? Or I thought, you know, my whatever you've got. This one has a ton of categories too, which I really like. It's got life insurance and, you know, licensing. I don't know about you, but I've got 2 cars and a boat and an ATV, and like I have to keep track of that because 2 of them come in January and 1 comes in June and 1 comes in July, and they're all different amounts. So this is kind of helpful to go through and say, okay, this is what I thought I was going to spend. This is what I actually spent. But really, it takes time, right? And it's going to be painful because who wants to spend time looking at that, right? It's probably not something you enjoy, probably not what you'd prefer to be doing. But if you take the time to set these up and actually track them, then that really gets you on track to getting out of debt because you know what you're spending and you know what you want to spend. So next time you walk in Walmart and you're like, ooh, this is on sale, it's only $10, it's usually $30, that's a great deal, but I don't know if I want to spend $10 on that because I'd rather put that toward this, right? And it helps you just be more aware of your spending habits because it's easy to just go spend, but it's hard to stay on top of it and be aware of what you're spending. What do you want to spend your money on? Okay? So then after you've done your actual, so we call it budget to actual, but basically what did you think you were going to spend? What did you actually spend and what's the difference? Then you can go through and kind of fix it. So if you thought you were going to spend $600 on groceries, but you spent $900 on groceries, you should probably adjust your budget because that's a huge difference. If you thought you were going to spend $600 and you spent $550, you're probably pretty close, you know. Even if it was $650, you probably don't need to adjust your budget. That's probably approximately okay. You just went a little over this month, right? So, or if you do like me and every spring you buy a cow or half a cow, then in your March budget, you're going to want to have $800 for your half a cow, right? And then my groceries the rest of the year are lower because I've already bought all my meat, right? So I buy my chicken in bulk and I buy my cow in bulk, and then, but I kind of have to account for that. Otherwise, March is going to be horribly painful. And then the other months, I'm going to be like, woohoo, I got all this extra money, right? So the idea is to really kind of manage your you know, your flows, your ebbs and flows, right? Okay. Does anybody have a question so far? No. Okay.
There was links to the budget.
There are, yeah. And this is a good one. And there's probably 100 more on the internet. What?
You want me to run the computer?
No? You can't hear me? No, I'm good. Okay. So welcome. I'm Joy. I'm glad you came. Thank you. Okay. So there's 2 ways to balance a budget. There's only 2. I know I need to go have this talk with Congress, but we'll just keep it among us. You can either make more money or you can have fewer expenses. And that's it. It's not rocket science. It's hard, but it's not rocket science. And most of us can't go out tomorrow and say, oh, I'm going to make more money. That'll fix everything, right? So really the key to balancing your budget is managing your expenses. Unless you're underemployed, which is definitely, there are lots of people who are underemployed. Do you know that term? That you're not really leveraging all your skills and experience and education, and you're in a job that maybe you're not getting paid what you're really worth. We call that underemployment. So if you're underemployed, absolutely start addressing that, because you shouldn't be living, below your income earning potential, just because there's so many resources here, especially in Utah. All the employment centers and everything, absolutely go find a job that better fits your abilities and capacities. Okay, so, I put in my notes, you should spend some time on monster.com if you're underemployed. Okay, secondly, expenses. So priorities and priorities, right? Every family has different priorities, so I'm not standing up here and saying, sell your house and get a smaller house, sell your car and get a cheaper car. You know what? Some people care about a big house and they don't really care about their car. They drive a junker. That's fine. Some people care a lot about their car and having a boat, and so they'll live in a smaller house. Like, some people really care about traveling, so their houses are really not that great and their cars aren't that great, but they travel the world. Some people really care about eating out, so that's their priority. You need to decide, what is my priority? Because in my experience, you can't do everything, unless you make a lot more than I've ever made. But you can't really have a big house and drive a fancy car and do all the traveling and do all that, unless you're just one of those elite people that makes a ton of money. So what are your priorities? Sit down with your spouse, sit down with your family. What's important to us? What really matters? If the fancy car doesn't really matter and you're in over your head on your car, then sell it or trade it in and get a cheaper car. My brother had his car paid off, and it was a Pilot. It was a 2007 Pilot. They loved that car. And they had their second kid, and they said, this isn't really the right car for us. We like that it tows a trailer and stuff, but we'd be much better suited with a minivan. Well, they wanted a nice minivan, but their car was paid off, and they didn't want to go into debt. So they went and they traded their Pilot that was paid off straight across for an older minivan that was paid off. And then they had the right car for them, and they still weren't in debt. So is it the right car at the right time for your family? And you don't necessarily have to go buy a new car or buy a new house but get the things that you care about kind of where you want them with your money. If you care a lot about a nice house, I think the general rule of thumb is your house payment should be more than 25% of your gross income. And of course, we don't bring home our gross income, right? We bring home our net, so it's a much higher percentage of our net. But it's easy to kind of look at your gross income and say, what's 25% of that? Okay, if my house payment is in that range, then it's probably manageable. Then I need to look at my other stuff, right? I don't know about you, but I don't like being house poor. My mom loves to be house poor. She loves to have a beautiful house. She doesn't even care if she has a car to drive, but she loves having a fancy house. But you know what? That's her decision. That's my dad's decision. That's none of my business. So everybody gets to make those decisions for themselves. So, spread out. Make your priorities. But we are at a church function. Pay your tithing first. You will be blessed. The Lord has made promises in the scriptures, if we are worthy and consistent tithe payers, that He will open the windows of heaven on our behalf. And we will never know if that's true if we don't take Him up on it. So pay your tithing and tell the Lord, okay, Lord, I have paid you first. Now I need those blessings. Because He's just waiting to bless us. And I know that. I know that's true. And I know that if we pay our tithing first, that we will be blessed. Whether it's to be blessed to have added capacity when we sit down and do our budget so that it makes sense and we can understand it, or maybe it's when we go to the store, it's easier to make those sacrifices and say, you know what, I can't really afford that, but that's okay, because we'll get by on this. I don't know how He's going to bless you, but I promise He will bless you, because it's in the scriptures, and I believe that the scriptures are true, and that when He makes us a blessing, He makes us a promise, He means it, and He sticks to it. So take the Lord up on His blessings and pay it first. And if you leave it in your account and say, well, I'll leave my tithing there and we'll just have it just in case. And then if we don't need it by the end of the month, I'll go ahead and pay it. Well, I guarantee you if it's there, it'll get spent. So just don't leave it there. Just get it out of there right now. It's just not even worth it. I actually have a whole separate checking account that I put my tithing in, and then I write my tithing check off of that account, and that's it. So even if the check doesn't clear right away, or even if I don't go to church for a couple days, that money's not even in my spending account. It's in a totally separate account, and when I get around to handing the bishop the check, it doesn't matter, it's a done deal, it's out. I like that. For me, I do that actually with all my checks, because I don't like dealing with what checks are outstanding, and it's hard, so I just have a separate account for any checks that I write. I put the money in that account, I write the check, and then it doesn't matter, I just leave that account alone. So that's just what I do. You can do whatever you like. Okay. If you have a huge tax refund every year, and you're going in debt every month, then you should probably address that. This is a very handy thing. This is called the circular E. You guys have probably never looked at this. How many of you have ever looked at the circular E? No one? Oh, good. I hope no one else is as crazy as I am. So, this is the document that your employer uses, or your employer's software uses, to determine how much of your income is withheld in income tax. So if you go on your W-4 and say, I'm married and I have 5 exemptions, then they look up, hang on, I'm getting to the tables. They will look up these tables and say, well, you make this much, and you claim this many exemptions, and this is how much tax we'll withhold. And you can do this. You can look up all by yourself. You can say, I make this much money, I claim this many exemptions, and you can look at your paycheck and it will be the same number because it's a finite algorithm, okay? So if you're claiming 0, but you really have 4 kids and you're getting $6,000 back in April, but you have $6,000 in credit card debt by April, and so you just use that money to pay off your credit cards, you're basically giving the government an interest-free loan and then paying all your credit card interest. Where if you were managing that month to month and you had that extra money every month, then you wouldn't get a huge refund, but you'd have all that interest that you just paid your credit cards in your own pocket. Because you wouldn't have that interest and the stress of having that interest, right? Because having credit card debt is stressful and weighs us down. And if we can be smarter with our money month to month instead of letting the government sit on it, we can take it and say, okay, let's use this money. It might be $100 a month. It might be $300 a month. I mean, if you're getting a $6,000 tax refund, that's a lot of money every month that the government's sitting on and doing nothing, whatever the government wants to do with it, until you go and claim it. So keep your money, spend your own money. You are a better steward than the government. So manage that.
Is this just federal?
This is federal, yeah, but the state will closely
similar thing.
mirror.
So
So you can't really clarify, I'm married in 0 for federal, but I'm married in 5 for state. It's
Oh,
one and the same. So really, if you figure out for federal, then the state's gonna be
You're
pretty
saying
close.
it's better to have no exemptions?
No, I mean,
Or
it
it's better-
depends. If you have more exemptions, then they will withhold less money. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you're coming out about even every April, leave it alone. But if you're getting a huge refund every April, but you're in debt every April and you're using, then you're just kind of you're just letting the government use your money, and then you're paying all that interest that you could be paying your own expenses, not going into debt every month,
So if you want more
and
of
then
your,
come out even.
more of your own money,
More of your
you
own
want
money,
more
exactly.
exemptions.
You would
You
want,
could claim more.
yes.
Whatever.
yes.
Oh.
More exemptions will be more money in your pocket.
Yeah.
Fewer exemptions will be higher withholding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
What is that? I have a friend that told me he claimed single, but he's married, and then at the end of the year he gets more refund.
Yeah, well, he shouldn't do that because he's married, but single withholding rates are higher than married withholding rates because single people pay more taxes than married people, right? So, I mean, they theoretically got rid of that with the marriage tax penalty, whatever, but they really didn't all the way. So, he's just basically giving the government an interest-free loan. It's still all his money. He's still getting more money back in April that he could be having all through the previous year. So, you want to kind of manage how much money you're letting the government sit on.
But you can claim you can put your status as married and then claim as single to. Like
You're not
he said, it's
supposed to.
just- it's not-
You're not supposed to, but yes, you can. They
So-
don't check it, but you're not supposed to.
Joy, what would you say is the smart amount that you might be not close to evened out in April,
Uh-huh.
but say it's a safe net, if you will, so you still get something back, but you're not, I
Right,
guess.
like exorbitant
Yeah.
amount. That's where this publication comes in handy, because you can go through, I mean, you can look at your last year's taxes. If your income isn't changing a ton, well, you just moved here. Did you move from out of state? So it's a
Yeah.
little tricky when you move from out of state, because,
We moved
you
from
know,
Florida, so-
your employer probably changed. And Florida doesn't have income tax, so Utah's 5.5, but it's flat. So Utah's actually kind of,
That was 5.
well, it's 5.5. Maybe it is 5.
I think they changed
Anyway,
it to 5.
okay.
But
So
whatever,
it's
5.
flat though, so it's easier to figure out than some states, because
Right.
some states are the graduate rates and so it's trickier. So Utah's easier to figure out, but still, they allow some stuff that the federal doesn't, and vice versa. And so yours is going to be a little more tricky until you get settled in, but you could still make a pretty good guess. And yours would be a guess. but you could make a pretty good guess based on what you're, earning and all that stuff. And you can look at your mortgage interest statement, and your mortgage interest is gonna vary a little bit, but not a ton, especially if you're on a 30-year loan. So if you know how much your interest was this month, and you multiply that by 12, you're gonna be a little bit high, but not too high, especially since it's already August. And you can kind of figure out what your mortgage exemption would be and what your charitables would be, and you could do a little projection, or you could have somebody like me do that. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, because I have lots of clients that will get, so stressed by the end of the year, and then they get these major refunds, and I'm like, why are you letting the government sit on all that money? You could have it and not have all that stress, because having the debt is stressful, and being able to pay off the debt is rewarding. But think of all the hundreds of dollars you're paying in interest during the year that you wouldn't have to pay, and you'd keep all that extra money in your pocket. So just consider that. And this publication 15 is actually, it's not too hard to read. So you look at it basically, it's 67 pages. But you look at the top. So this one is married people getting paid monthly, right? And there's married people getting paid bi-monthly. There's married people getting paid weekly. There's single people getting paid bi-weekly. So you find which category you're in and how often you get paid, and then what your wages are, right? So if I get paid monthly and I'm married and I make $1,400 a month and I claim 4 exemptions, then I'm just going to go over and they're not going to withhold anything.
We're in a class.
Right? Does that make sense? So that's kind of how you read it. So you just look at if it's monthly, then your monthly wages. If it's bi-monthly, you look at your bi-monthly wages, okay? And it's basically and then if you make over a certain amount, they just give you a percentage to figure out. So, and you just do the calculation with the percentage.
Okay, but this just show you how much they will withhold
Mm-hmm.
versus how
Per
you
paycheck.
Yes.
So then you look at the end of the year and say, okay, well, if I get paid monthly, I'm gonna get 12 paychecks. If they're withholding $15 a paycheck, right? Then times 12, that's how much they're withholding. Well, how much did I actually owe? If I didn't owe any tax, and I got a refundable child tax credit, then I need to really be claiming something that's withholding 0, right? Because they shouldn't be taking any of my money, right? So, kind of look at what your tax liability is at the end of the year, and then, anyway, we're getting a little bit off on a tangent, but I feel like this is a huge hole that people could be using to their benefit that people don't, because they don't understand it. So if you would like more time on this, I'm happy to help you guys. Okay. So, to your budget. You have a plan. So you have a budget. So, taking the time to track what you spent was our time one, right? It's hard to make a budget, but you have to do it. It takes energy to track it, right? We figured out what our priorities are. Now we have a budget. Now we have our plan. This is our plan, right? So I did a little example here. Okay, so this is a family that has 3 credit cards and 2 cars. Can you see that? Okay, you can run this one, honey. Okay, so I just made like a little, so we've got 3 credit cards and 2 cars that we owe money on. And I made these a 4-year loan, a 48-year note, and this is the interest rate. I figured this one was new and this one was used, right? So that's our total debt. So that's our total debt for this family. So my minimum payments added up are $1,500, but I just did a budget, and I decided in my budget that I want to put $2,000 a month to my debt. So this is how you figure out what to pay first, how much to pay. You ready? So I decided to pay this one first because it has the lowest balance. And I figure I'm just going to get one knocked off because that's going to make me feel good, and the interest rate isn't so much, it's a little higher, right? So generally you're going to look at the outstanding balance and the interest rate to decide which one you want to pay off first. You generally will default to the highest interest rate, but if you've got one card that's lower than the other ones, pay that one off first because it'll make you feel good and help you stay on track. So I'm going to pay this one off first, then I'm going to look at interest rates. I'm going to pay this one off, and then this one off, and then I'm going to go down and pay this one off because it's a higher interest rate than this one, okay? So I did this. So these are 4-year notes, and who knows, credit cards, they'll make you pay forever, right? And based on this, and then you do get one $2,000 Christmas bonus, that's it, to make it go a little faster, right, in November. But with this setup, you pay off all 5 of these things in 3.5 years. Okay? So this extra money, it's $478.30 that we had extra every month. And that makes a huge difference. So we're gonna pay it toward card 1. So for card 1, we're gonna pay our $124 plus our extra $478. That's the difference between these two, right? And we're gonna pay it here, here, and then we got our Christmas bonus, yay! And instead of having a really extravagant Christmas, we're gonna stick to our plan. We're just gonna accelerate our plan. Our kids are gonna be fine. They can get a few new books, they'll be good. They don't need a $2,000 Christmas. We're gonna pay off our cards, right? Because we have priorities. And this is our priority, and this is our plan. Then I'm gonna make one more payment. This one actually comes short about $100, but anyway, so then I get that one paid off. So what's my next priority? It's this one, $7,000. So now I'm gonna pay this $124, this $125, and the $478 difference to this card, right? So I just went from $125 to that number. That's gonna make a huge difference, right? Scroll down a little bit. I'm gonna start paying down this sucker, and it's gonna go so fast. Look at that, look how fast that's paid off. That's less than a year. I just paid off a $7,000 credit card in less than a year. Because I had a plan, and I stuck to my plan, and I had priorities, and my priorities are to get out of debt. So now I'm gonna go to card 3. So now, instead of saying, oh, I've got an extra $125 a month, or an extra $100 these two, and I can do other things, this is my debt. My $2,000 a month is going to debt, regardless. I am sticking to my plan. Go down. So card 3, go down. Now look at that number. Look how big that number gets. So I took the difference in this month, right, because we paid it off. Then I took the $124 from the first card, the $125 from the second card, plus my minimum payment on this card, plus the $478 that's my extra, and I paid down this card. Look how fast that goes. And that is done. That's from November to February, so a year and 3 months. And that card is gone. That was a 7,000, no, this was a,
10,000.
no, I think that was my 7, wasn't it? Is that my third?
15.
Ooh, that's my $15,000 balance. I just got paid off. That felt really good. Really good. I'm still committed to my $2,000. I don't have any credit card debt. And the prophet says it's okay if I have a car note, right? Well, but my plan is to get out of debt, and my plan is to spend my $2,000 a month on debt every month. So now I'm going to go to that 5th car here, and I'm going to take all that money and pay it toward that car. Look how fast I get that car paid off. 7 months. That feels good. That's done. Now I'm going to apply all the extra to this very last car, my whole $2,000 a month, and look how fast that car's paid off. I just paid off 3 credit cards and 2 cars in 3 years and 5 months. Because I had a plan, and I stuck to it, and I had priorities, and my priorities were to get out of debt. And I had $2,000 a month in my budget to pay toward debt. And I sacrificed some other things, but how good would that feel in 3.5 years to be out of debt?
What do you do with that 2,000 after that?
Then, okay, then this is what you do. That's a great question.
Yeah.
You pay yourself, and you build your nest egg, and you have security. And you don't pay yourself very much until you get your creditors paid off. Because when you lose your job, or you hurt yourself, or your wife gets cancer, or whatever life throws at you, it feels really good if you've got some money in the bank and you can say, you know what, we're okay. We don't need that. We're going to be fine. Because we've paid ourselves. Because we had a plan and we were committed.
You want the mortgage.
And then if you want to pay your mortgage, go ahead. But most of you probably have mortgage rates that are so low that it's up to you. If you want to pay your mortgage off early, knock yourself out. But for me, I like to get a nest egg that's pretty comfortable before I start attacking the mortgage. Because if my nest egg is big, I can pay the mortgage for a while without any stress. And if your nest egg is so big that you're like, you know what, we're really good. We got a lot of money in the bank, we're comfortable. We don't want to have so much money in the bank that we're stressed about, what if the stock market crashes, let's go ahead and pay off our other debts. Yeah, absolutely. Pay an extra payment every year on your house and you'll pay it off 7 years faster. 1 extra payment, 7 years, right there, boom. You can do little things like that. Next time you go to buy a car, not an issue. You paid yourself. You paid yourself $2,000 a month. You got plenty of money. Go buy a car and pay cash and feel good. right? I mean, your expenses aren't gonna go away, life keeps coming at you, right? Things are gonna come up, but if you've paid yourself and you've got a nest egg, you're not gonna be so stressed about it, cause it's gonna take care of itself. And maybe this number is $500 for you, and maybe this number is $200 for you, and maybe this number is $50 for you. But you know what? Kenneth has been saving since he was 6, and he's 14, and he has $500 in the bank. And that wasn't that much money, but it adds up over time. So no matter what you can afford to pay yourself, pay yourself. But don't pay yourself too much until you get all these people taken care of, because you're not going to charge yourself interest, and all these people are charging you interest. Okay? So does anybody have any questions? That was a great question, by the way. Good question. I will say one more thing then. If you don't have any questions. Any questions? Teach your kids to manage money. I'm serious. Teach your kids to manage money, because they're the next generation, and our country is in trouble, and our habits are in trouble, and if we don't get ourselves under control and teach our kids will be so empowered if they never have to come to a class like this, because they've never gotten into that like this. It will be so awesome. Sit down at the kitchen table and say, give them all a piece of paper, and say, how much do you think this gallon of milk costs? How much do you think this loaf of bread costs? How much do you think it costs to fill Mom's car with gas? How much were those shoes you got? Make them aware. There's nothing wrong with them being aware of what finances are going on around them. In Scouts, they have to go to the grocery store with you and write it all down. Fantastic. For a merit badge, they have to track their finances for 3 months. Great. Get them doing that. I choose to teach my children to manage money by giving them what some people would call an allowance. It's not an extravagant allowance, and there are strict guidelines. But once they start getting that money, they have to buy other people gifts. I do not buy birthday gifts for their friends. If they get invited to a party, that comes out of their money. Because I think that when we get money, how much of your paycheck do you spend on yourself? Like realistically?
Not very much.
1% maybe? I mean, sure, you get the benefit of driving a car and living in a house, but for real, like, disposable income, not a lot, I bet. So what can you do to teach your boys that even when you have money, it feels good to help other people and spend it on other people, and it's gratifying to decide that you want to have a family, and it feels good to be able to make the mortgage. Teach your kids those lessons. Teach them those principles. Let them feel that gratitude. Let them learn about how good it feels to earn money and spend it on someone else. Because it does feel good. It feels great. But we aren't in a position to give money to anybody else if we can't take care of ourselves. So let's get ourselves under control and teach our kids and do some home exercises. If you want to find out how I do allowance, I'm happy to tell you. I have another friend that does it a completely different way, and it works for their family. I think every family can come up with a different plan, and it can be just as effective. But really the key part is deciding what to do and sticking with it, doing it. Don't set one up and then 2 months later, I just don't have time for that. I don't have, decide what you're going to do, implement it, and be consistent. There's 1,000 different ways. But teach your kids about money and teach them young so that they learn from 6 to 13. This is my spender. I can't even tell you the number of times we've been in a store and he's been like, I have $3. What can I find that's $3? And now he's 14 and he has $100 in the bank and he has saved it. But it took me 8 years to get to that point. And I'd rather have him learn it from 6 to 14 than from 18 to 24. Right? When did we learn it? Have we learned it yet?
No.
It is hard to walk in a store and walk out with something without something you really want. It's hard.
I know.
So teach them. Let them learn. Let's learn. Let's learn together, And we can do it. Make a plan. When you lose weight, man, you feel good. When you get out of debt, you have that plan and you're living on your budget and you know where you are and you know what you're spending, it feels good. So do it. And have a great time. And call me if you need me. My time is up. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.